There are moments when the safest choice becomes the deadliest one. On October 15, 1908, the people of Metz, Michigan, faced such a moment. A forest fire was racing toward their village. Smoke covered the sky. Flames moved through the timber. Homes, barns, and fields were beginning to burn. Then a train arrived. To the frightened families of Metz, it must have looked like salvation. The Detroit and Mackinac Railway had sent the train to carry them south toward Posen, only a few miles away. Women gathered children, families loaded trunks, furniture, and whatever possessions they could lift. Some passengers climbed into enclosed freight cars. Others crowded into open gondola cars ordinarily used to haul coal, stone, or timber. About 40 people boarded. The train pulled away as the village disappeared into fire. It did not get far. At a railroad siding outside Metz, the rails had been damaged by the heat. The locomotive left the track. The evacuation train stopped in the middle of the burning forest, and the people who had fled the fire found themselves trapped inside it. Metz was a small farming and lumber community in Presque Isle County, west of Rogers City. The Detroit and Mackinac Railway connected the village with Posen, Alpena, and communities farther south. The railroad moved mail, passengers, farm products, and timber through northeastern Michigan. But the region carried a danger left behind by the lumber industry. Years of logging had filled the woods with slash, branches, treetops, bark, and other material that loggers did not take. Cedar posts, railroad ties, and piles of hemlock bark were stacked near sidings and mills. During wet years, the debris slowly decayed. During dry years, it became fuel. The summer and early fall of 1908 had left parts of northern Michigan dangerously dry. Small fires were already burning in the region. Farmers commonly used fire to clear land, while sparks from locomotives, logging operations, and burning brush could ignite nearby timber. The exact starting point of the Metz Fire remains uncertain. It may not have been one single blaze at first. Several fires appear to have spread and merged as strong winds drove them across Presque Isle County. By late morning on October 15th, the fires were moving fast. Then the wind strengthened. The separate flames became a wall. The fire would ultimately burn more than 200,000 acres, destroy or damage hundreds of farms, and leave more than 100 families without homes. The Presque Isle County Historical Museum places the overall death toll at 37, but those numbers came later. In Metz, the people could see only smoke. The village had little protection. There were no tanker trucks, no aircraft dropped water, no organized wildfire command post tracked the advancing front. People fought with buckets, shovels, wet blankets, and hand pumps. Farmers tried to save barns filled with hay. Families soaked quilts and spread them across roofs. Some released livestock and hoped the animals could outrun the flames. Others began moving toward the railroad. The Detroit and Mackinac Railway sent an evacuation train into Metz as the fire closed in. Accounts describe a locomotive pulling 3 boxcars and 2 open gondola cars. The crew's assignment was straightforward: collect the residents and carry them to Posen. But evacuations are rarely orderly when people believe they may lose everything. Passengers arrived with children, clothing, and food. Then came household goods, beds, dressers, trunks. Furniture was loaded while the fire advanced. One often repeated account says a local saloon owner delayed the train while his liquor stock was placed aboard. The detail appears in historical accounts preserved by the Presque Isle County Historical Museum, although it is difficult to know how much time the loading actually cost. Every minute mattered. The train waited. The smoke thickened. The fire moved closer. Finally, there was no more time. The engineer opened the throttle, and the evacuation train left Metz. Imagine the view from one of those open cars. There was no roof, no walls, only low steel sides around a platform packed with people and possessions. Children sat beside mothers. Men stood near furniture and trunks. Sparks blew across the train. Smoke stung their eyes. The locomotive pushed into a world that no longer looked familiar. Trees burned on both sides of the track. Telephone poles fell. Farm buildings collapsed in showers of sparks. The train was supposed to travel about 5 miles to Posen. It made it perhaps 2. Ahead was Nowicki's siding. Railroad sidings were working spaces where cars could be stored, loaded, or moved aside. At Nowicki's siding, piles of cedar posts, railroad ties, and hemlock bark stood near the tracks. By the time the train approached, those piles were burning. Flames rose on both sides of the railroad. The crew faced an impossible decision. Stop, and the fire would overtake the train. Reverse and return toward a village already surrounded by flames. Or accelerate and try to force a path through. The engineer chose the only option that seemed to offer a chance. He drove forward. Survivor Arthur White later described what came next in blunt terms. They ran into a regular hell of flames and smoke. The locomotive entered the burning siding. The heat was intense enough to damage the railroad itself. Wooden ties beneath the rails had burned. The steel rails had warped, loosened, or spread apart. A train can survive smoke. It can sometimes pass through fire. It cannot remain upright when the track beneath it is gone. The locomotive derailed. The cars behind it followed. The train stopped with burning timber stacked around it and flames moving through the surrounding forest. Passengers were thrown against one another. Furniture shifted. The open gondola cars became traps. People jumped. Some crawled beneath smoke. Others followed the railroad bed, using the tracks as their only guide through the darkness. The fire roared loudly enough to drown voices. Those who escaped had to keep moving, even when they could not see where they were going. Some survivors crawled back toward Metz. Others found small clearings or patches of burned ground where the flames had less fuel. But many of the women and children inside one gondola car could not escape. Historical accounts disagree on the precise number killed aboard the train. Michigan's historical marker lists 16 deaths, while the Presque Isle County Historical Museum has cited 17. Other detailed accounts describe 12 people dying in the gondola itself, including 9 children with their mothers. The conflict reflects the confusion of the fire, incomplete records, and the difficulty of identifying remains after such intense heat. What is not disputed is the nature of their deaths. When rescuers reached the wreck, little remained in the gondola except ash, fragments of bone, and pieces of personal belongings. The train sent to save them had carried them into the center of the fire. Not everyone in Metz had boarded. John Zimmerman lived with his children on a farm near the railroad. As the evacuation train prepared to leave, his children pleaded with him to let them go. Zimmerman refused. According to an account later published in the Detroit News, he believed the family had a better chance defending their own property than traveling through the burning woods. The children watched their neighbors leave. They thought their father had made a terrible mistake. The Zimmermans pumped water into tubs. They soaked blankets and quilts. They tried to protect the roof from sparks. Then the fire overwhelmed the farm. The family fled through burned fields and areas where the flames had already passed. They survived. 2 small girls from another family also escaped the train disaster and eventually came under Zimmerman's care. Their mother died in the gondola. The father who refused the rescue train had saved his children from it. That does not mean staying behind was the wiser choice for everyone. Other people died in homes, barns, fields, and roads. One firefighter reportedly sought protection inside a water reservoir and died when the water became dangerously hot. Families were separated. Livestock burned. Entire farms disappeared. There was no universally safe decision. There were only choices made with smoke closing in. The fire did not stop at Metz. It moved east and south across Presque Isle County, threatening Rogers City and reaching toward Alpena. Historical accounts say flames crossed waterways and even jumped across portions of Grand Lake before reaching the Lake Huron shore. By the time rain, weaker winds, and a lack of fuel slowed the fire, much of the region had been transformed. Metz was devastated. Farms had lost homes, barns, tools, seed, hay, and livestock. According to figures drawn from the state relief effort, hundreds of families suffered total or partial losses. More than 4,600 people eventually received some form of assistance. The destruction came at the worst possible time. Northern Michigan winter was approaching. People who had lost homes also lacked coats, bedding, tools, and feed for surviving animals. The first ice appeared on nearby lakes before the end of October. Relief had to arrive quickly. The same railroad involved in the evacuation disaster became central to the recovery. The Detroit and Mackinac brought food, clothing, lumber, and supplies into the burned district. Railroad construction crews built small emergency houses, often called relief shacks. The structures were simple, roughly 16 feet by 20 feet, made with rough boards, tar paper, and a small stove. They were not comfortable, but they gave families a roof before winter. Donations arrived from across Michigan. Residents of Grosse Pointe sent clothing. Some women in Metz reportedly found themselves wearing formal dresses and fashionable garments donated by wealthier families. Clothing hardly suited to farm work, but better than having nothing. Governor Fred Warner toured the burned district by special train and urged Michiganders to send food, lumber, and hay rather than more clothing. Reports estimated that 1,200 to 1,500 people around Metz were in immediate need. The relief effort kept many families alive through the winter. It could not restore the people lost at Nowicki's siding. The Metz Fire is often reduced to one terrible image: a train derailed in flames, but the deeper story is about the danger of making decisions with incomplete information. The railroad crew did not knowingly drive passengers toward death. They were trying to outrun a moving fire. The residents did not foolishly board a dangerous train. They saw transportation, authority, and a route out. The families who loaded furniture were not necessarily choosing possessions over life. Many believed they were losing their homes forever and had only minutes to save what represented years of work. The engineer did not have a safe track ahead and a dangerous one behind. Both directions were burning. Every choice was being erased by the fire almost as soon as it was made. Today, the railroad through Metz is gone. Part of the former route has become a recreational trail. Autumn leaves grow beside the old grade. A Michigan historical marker recalls the disaster. Visitors can stand near the path and read that a train filled with women and children once raced through that same place, trying to reach safety. The countryside is green again. The burned farms were rebuilt, trees returned, but at Nowicki's siding, the central fact remains difficult to accept. The people of Metz saw the train arrive and believed their worst moment was ending. They gathered their children. They climbed aboard. They left the burning village behind. Then the rails twisted beneath them, and the train that fled the fire carried them directly into it. This is End of the Road in Michigan. Thanks for listening. Please comment and follow the End of the Road in Michigan podcast for more strange, tragic, and nearly forgotten stories from Michigan's past.